In terms of slow content, it may be that with that acquisition strategies may be shifted to more synthetic analysis of things rather than sort of here's a way of thinking about these issues as opposed to here's this very deep, very niche-y analysis of stuff, and that sort of raises the question of public intellectuals and how they might be functioning and whether that's part of our job is to publish those folks. I'm just sort of meandering around at this point.
The answer to the question of how do we react to the slow content movement is we just keep doing our core capability, which is publishing a sustained argument. We'll be there with those long, thoughtful discussions of topics, as we always have.
Sure.
Even as we continue to publish those long content arguments, it doesn't mean people will read them. We could just aggregate them and people could read them in a little bit and think about them over a longer period of time rather than one sustained interaction with them.
So long form via serialization or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Airplane ride book. I said, I want a book that's as long as an airplane ride.
Oh.
Where are you going?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
California, so I wasn't ever going.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the session on where they mentioned long-form argument, but I worry about that a lot. I worry about both my own appetite for longer arguments because I find that I read so many short scientific articles. And even though intellectually I know this is facile, this person has it much easier because she's arguing in a short form and does not have to take it out to all of the ends that come out of that. But I always worry about our ability to produce.
Right. And if that declines, the ability to produce it, does that change? Well, back to this question about distraction. Before, it was easy to have lots of paper and to record things. People built these memory castles, where it was a mnemonic device for remembering stuff. I'm not sure that's better or worse than Google. It's different, but it is a completely lost form of thinking. May we end up losing long-form argumentation of nuanced perspective based on deep study of a field or of a discipline or of a way of thinking. I hope not, and I don't think so. And part of what I'm interested in hearing here is that there's sort of a presumption that we as humans will find ways to fight back against the flood, to find ways of being human and to find ways of being intellectually stimulated even in a notion of crap. And I hope that's true. But I'm getting sort of off track. Yes?
I don't know if anybody's read Clay's Sarkisian's work, but I saw a video of him talking about it, and I think it's called Cognitive Social. And he talks about episodes in history when events have freed up a lot of attention and time that was being devoted to something else, and it was suddenly available. And during those times, people become much more productive. So he says, it was only when the English stopped drinking as much gin that we had the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
And he tells a funny story about talking with someone who works in television about a project that his students were doing online and what they learned from it. And she just looked at him and said, where do people get the time? And he said to her, nobody who works in television gets asked that.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
The time and you're sucking it up.
Right.
But it just makes me, I think he's articulating more positive vision of the future our kids could be creating if they're actually engaging with content rather than just watching television.
Yeah. Well, and I believe television hours watched is actually declining, and that's where it's mostly being taken away from. Is from television.
Right.
And
you see that as a very positive
Yeah, less Three's Company. I'm all over that. Yeah.
Because these two kids actually making stuff.
Yeah.
They're doing
Yeah,
stuff,
and
they're
following their
actually-
passion is, yeah, right, yeah, absolutely. Well, we sort of got off track, which is just fine, because I'm not going to do the other thing, the sitting around group brainstorming, because we don't have time now. But that's fine. What somebody said when I was talking about this was that this is sort of micro crowdsourcing. What we just are doing here is sort of crowdsourcing some possibilities and some things to think about. Any points that want to be made? I want to come back to that. I just want to reiterate that point that there are billions of people who don't have access to this information and access to this flood. And I'm also not certain what will happen when they do get access to it, because we grew up with it and have developed some kind of calluses on our brain to allow us to not end up, well, it's sort of like, you learn how to play guitar, you only play as long as you can, and then you come back to it, and eventually you can play for hours. If I was somebody from the village my wife spent a couple of months in Western Kenya, and suddenly you're faced with abundance like we currently have just right now, the overwhelm could be pretty significant. And so that will be also interesting to see how that plays out as underserved communities come online and find their own ways. Well, actually, I'll tell you one more story. Of the cell phones in this little town in India, and what happened with there's great fear that everybody getting cell phones would change the fishing business. But what the fishermen did was there were only 3 places that fish got sold, and before the cell phones, they would come into the one they just sort of hoped would be the one that their fish would sell in. And so on a Monday, there'd be a surf it in town A or B or C, and they'd end up shoveling all this stuff over the side of the boats. And this researcher was studying this, and after cell phones came in, waste the pounds of waste went down to almost zero, because they were able to coordinate, because they were a community. They were able to coordinate going to the right places. So every one of the ports had a robust, healthy fish market, and there was less waste and less fishing, in fact. And so it ended up sort of working out. So there are ways in which these tools could end up being really good, even better. That we force these things to work to our betterment. When there's a problem, we figure out ways to fix it, I hope. So. All right, well, it's the end of a long day. I'm really glad that you guys were helping me understand these things. Thanks. All right. I didn't do anything.